Alright, so here is the prototype is going to be on this side, and the new version is going to be on this side, and I'll go over that in a minute. So first off, I wanted to go over all of this right here. So you can see right here, the old system, I used to actually go through and check each section of their name. So for Arabic, I wanted their ruler title first. I wanted their regal nickname second. So this is actually a scripted GUI. I'll go over those in a second. Then I want their kunya or their techonym, which is I'll also go over in a second. After that, I wanted to grab their first name. So this is actually the root of how the naming system works, is that I use localize, concatenate. I'm grabbing the first name of the character that I want to translate. So remember how I can use one name key. So I use one name key and then I generate another key back here based off their culture. So when you see the I'll show you in a second, but there's a couple different keys that you can output using this method, and the localize command will actually translate it for you. So they'll show up correctly when you actually get into game or wherever you call this key from. And then of course I want the patronym and the nickname. A couple of these are actually just outputs of it, so I'll check to make sure that they have a tier, and then this is just grabbing the flavorization. The scripted GUIs I'll go in a second. Patronym is the same thing. I'll grab the father's name here, as you can see, and this is for sons. So I got male and I got daughters, female, and these will generate a key based off the first name of the father. So you can see I got give father and I get their name, I get the culture, and then I add another suffix at the end. Similar on the techonym, but these are actually outdated, so don't worry about these. And nicknames the same way as well. So you can see I have a couple of these culture keys. So you can see I add an Arabic or Andalusian because there's a couple different changes between the two. And of course a default just in case anything gets screwed up. Alright, so these are the keys that you have here. Let me split out a couple of them so you can see it a little bit easier. So if they have the character name Aban, and it's just going to be plain text in-game as the vanilla in-game, with the Arabic suffix, it will actually output this on the character screen. Alright, and then you're also going to see the same thing for patronyms. So I have the same name. So this is the father's name. This is the suffix of the culture of the current character. And then I want the patronym based off it's a son patronym of their dad. So Aban. Sometimes it's different based off the different names. Same thing for daughters. And of course you can also see a couple of the kunyas, how it's formed. It's a similar thing. This is the name of the son, the culture of the current character, and then I just put techonym mother of or techonym father of, and then I have an output here. And the great thing about using this type of system, as you can see here, is that if I just give them the name Abbas, I can actually put Al Abbas or Al Abbas or Abu Abbas, right? So I can actually change the way it actually shows up in screen without having to call the vanilla system itself. I'm basically generating a new localization key, and then that new localization key will have a predefined text. So I can have proper grammar, I can have I can change cultures and it will actually change the name. And there's a bunch of different stuff you can do with this system, as I'll show when I get to the other side. This is the system for naming kunyas or loquabs. So all these are generated on birth. These first couple are generated on birth. So what happens is that as long as they aren't a bastard, they are male, their father does exist, which is in case there's a problem, that father will end up, and as long as the father hasn't already had an eldest son. that character will be saved as an eldest son to their father as a variable, right? Same thing goes for the mother. The mother will have an eldest son. And then as a backup, I also have eldest daughter. So as long as they haven't had son or eldest daughter, they'll have their eldest daughter assigned as a variable too. After that, on the character's death, what will happen, or the father's death, as long as they had an eldest son, and that variable exists, so the variable is the eldest son, that eldest son will be saved again as a scope, and then saved either to the dynasty as a variable, or saved to a global list as a variable. So after these are saved to a variable, when I do scripted GUIs, I actually can pull up something real quick. I can detect if they're living or dead and then pull the correct file up on there. So for dead characters first, as long as they had a dynasty, we'll check those lists for the eldest son. If the dynasty doesn't exist, we'll check that global list again of eldest sons. When they're alive, we're basically just making sure that that variable that's saved to the character exists as well. And then we'll output the Cunha here. So these outputs will end up going to another, will end up going here, where I essentially generate those Cunha, the techonym keys again. So localize, concatenate. The target character is the son or daughter. And then I'm grabbing his first name, the culture of the current character, and then adding in the suffix at the end. And the reason why we have to go through scripted GUIs is because the sons and daughters can't be used as scopes for a character. You can use father and mother, but you can't use son or daughter. So you have to resave the son and daughter as a variable on the current character or in a dynasty, where you can detect if that variable has a father and assign something to that father. It's a little confusing, but if I ever send this over, you can see here that I'm saving the eldest son as a scope that I can reuse. As you can see here, I want scripted GUI eldest son, and you can see the object, the target character is the eldest son, and the effect root is the root character, which would be the father. So pretty exciting. You can also use the events here and scripted GUI. Find it real quick. This is the events at game startup to assign historical characters, their Cunhas, and their loquabs, which will also be outputted. Very similar to the Cunha system. It's basically detecting, are you in this list? If so, save it as such, and then output those loquabs. And you can actually see a couple here. So if we actually look for the missionary character, right here, I have Truth Summoner, or Summoner of Truth is essentially how this is located. So his regal nickname is Summoner of Truth, and you'll see it in game as such. Now going over to the new system, we're going to do the same thing as before, but we're going to replace the localization or the flavorization system. So there's a lot of problems with flavorization. For one, you cannot easily assign it to unlanded characters. Secondly, if you're trying to deal with compatibility, anything that's assigned a culture that does not exist when the mod is loaded, it will go and assign it to every character if it's a higher priority than other that properly assigned tiers. It will count the culture as culture check as not even existing. Another problem is that anything that's assigned through custom localization within flavorization will not stay upon death easily. So there's a lot of reasons to want to get rid of it. It is definitely a lot better system than CK2, but essentially I'm recreating the CK2 system where you like type out your conditions as the localization key and then what your localization is. If you remember the old system, you would put king, male, feudal, English, and then you would have king, and then whatever you wanted. So this will actually be your conditions and the localization key. So we're essentially going to recreate that system on the new generation. So I already wrote up a couple of ways to check for that. So first thing we want to do is that we were going to want to concatenate the tier of the character, right? So if we want king, we want to make sure that the king of the king character or king tier can be pulled as a localization key fragment. So you can see here I am generating, if they already hold an empire, they generate this half of the key. We're checking for consorts, make sure that they can get their own key. Princes can get their own key, kingdoms, and we can do this for independent characters too. So we're going to do a tier check. And we're also going to make sure that consorts of certain tiers and princes of certain tiers can be inputted in the system as well. After that, we're just going to want to check gender, so female, male. So if we have king and we want male again, we will generate this section, so dash male, and then we want to check for government status. So it comes with a built-in prioritization system. So religious titles will always come first. They're usually considered above the feudal system, the first estate, essentially. Now, you probably thinking we just go right into the feudal governments, but we actually want to check to make sure that special feudal vassalization contracts are counted too. So I have these scripted triggers set up to see if they are a March or Palatinate, which I'll post on the on our Discord as well as how they work. Essentially, I can also use the same variable system as I've shown on the events on this side, where I have variables that I can set up, and then that will check to make sure that if they were a marquise in their while they were alive. Because currently you cannot assign marquise or palatinate while they're dead. It'll default back to duchy or duke. So we're going to check that first, and then we're going to check feudal, clan. They're the same titles in our system, so it doesn't matter too much. We want to get rid of this clan. We don't need it. And we want tribal, republics, mercenary, and I'll put the rest below and fit in other modding as needed. So how to do mod compatibility in this system. So this is actually a very similar check to how Community Flavor Pack checks, is that I can script the trigger just for this mod as is CTP loaded. So is this mod loaded? Because if it is loaded, this will load and it's always triggered on. So it's a scripted trigger that if you check to make sure if it's yes or no, it's always yes when this mod is functioning. So I can actually add in other government types where I can check for if the mod that adds the government type is loaded or not. And with that, I can actually add the government type as a different key without having to upload a different version of the mod like you would with flavorization. So that's one of the big benefits of this system, is that I can actually build in the other mod compatibility without having to necessarily create another submod for the mod I want it to be compatible with. And of course, I also can put default at the end of everything to have default titles to make it work on every system. So after that, it's not shown here, but I will check for the culture of the characters. Every culture will be laid out just like it is over here, and every religion of the character, which very similar to how the culture works. And with that, I can actually generate a key. So if I had feudal, just like I have it up here, so I have feudal, and we want it English, right? And then I can do Catholic, and then I'll have these keys just automatically generated like in a stack. So there'd be like 10,000 localization keys just based off this system. And if I create a dynamic key to pull from, it will always pull, say, king, right? So I have a whole list of these that I can generate.